thumbs up. It's wonderful to see everybody here today. Do we have to push another button? We're good? Do I need both buttons? This one's on. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. My name is Mercedes Fogarasi. I am here today with the pleasure of moderating this session, which we have entitled AI as an Opportunity for More Impactful Open Data. Welcome everybody here. It's great to see so many faces and so many people here from the very beginning. This session and this conversation is going to be part of the theme on AI for economic development and social good. As we all know, AI is very much often described as a transformative technology, but AI doesn't emerge in a vacuum. It really depends fundamentally on data, and with that in particular on high quality, trusted, well-governed public data. For decades, national statistical offices have been really at the core of all of this, and they have been invested in producing open data as a public good. Open data to inform policy, to strengthen accountability, and to support inclusive development. Today, AI changes the whole scale of that conversation. It also changes the speed that everything is happening, and of course it changes things in ways that data can actually be used, reused, and add value. But all of this raises which is a big conversation that's interlinked. And finally, how do we ensure that this transition and this that will determine whether AI truly enhances the public value of open data or not. With that, I'll introduce our speakers, and then we'll have some opening remarks on a video here. So in terms of our speakers, we'll start just directly to my left. We have Mr. François Fontenot, who is a Senior Policy Advisor at Paris 21. Paris 21 stands for the Partnership in Statistics for Development in the 21st Century. That happens to be where I work as well, so very delighted to have my colleague here. François is an advisor on AI and data to the Chief Statistician of the OECD. He has over 20 years' experience advancing innovation and capacity building in statistical systems, particularly in the Global South. Next to Mr. Fontenot, we have Rohit Bhardwaj. Rohit is the Deputy Director General at India's National Statistical Office, where he leads innovation and emerging technology initiatives in official statistics, including AI and data dissemination reforms. Next to Shri Bhardwaj, we have Christopher Maloney. Chris is a program officer at the Hewlett Foundation, where he supports the use of high-quality data and evidence in policymaking, particularly in Africa. He previously held senior roles at USAID and the Millennium Challenge Corporation. And then finally, at the end of the line there, we have Mr. Randeep Tour. He is a senior technical leader at Google and leads infrastructure strategy for the Data Commons. The Data Commons is an open source initiative making global public data more accessible and AI ready. So those are our four panelists here today. It's a pleasure to have everyone. And as I mentioned, we will have a quick opening remark from Mr. Stefan Verhulst. He is well, I was going to say on the screen there, but I'm on the screen. I am not Stefan. Let me just pull up his video there. He is the other speaker that you may have seen. We can turn the screen to see what my screen is. There we go. So we have Mr. Stefan Verhulst here, who will introduce himself and kick off the debate.
Hi, I'm Stefan Verhulst. I'm the co-founder of the GovLab and of the Data Tank, and I'm also a research professor at the Tandon School of Engineering at New York University. And I'm delighted to be part of this panel. Unfortunately, I could not attend in person, but eager to share with you what we've been working on, which is ultimately the fourth wave of open data. Well, for the last few years, we've been working on trying to change the way we make decisions, improve decisions in terms of legitimacy and in terms of effectiveness by seeking how we can leverage data to make those decisions more data driven. And so that's one of the reasons why about 15 years ago we started to work on this whole notion of open data. The first wave of open data was freedom of information. The second wave of open data was where governments were providing access to their data on their platforms. And the last wave, or the third wave, I would say, is ultimately where private sector also started to provide access to some of their data for public interest purposes. Suffice to say that all the waves were building on each other. It's not like one wave replaced the other wave, and they all brought new concepts to the table. Now, despite the fact that we have seen those three waves over the last 10 years or so, what we also have seen, and this is especially the case the last few years, we actually have seen a backlash against those open data movements, what I have called a data winter. Despite the fact that we are in an AI summer, we may actually also enter in a data winter, by which I mean a decreased access to data, and especially a decrease in the fact that data is made accessible. And here is, of course, where Gen AI comes into play. Because what we are seeing that AI can actually be a force for democratizing data as well. But open data can also be a force for improving AI is being trained or AI is performing as well. And so the fourth wave of open data is really the wave where AI and data is intersecting with each other, both in terms of open data for AI, where we have seen different scenarios play out where open data can play a role, whether it's to improve AI training or whether it's ultimately to augment some of the data sets that are needed in order to provide context-specific context-specific answers to particular kind of prompts. We have tried to catalog a lot of those scenarios that we have identified where open data can be a force for improvement of AI. And of course, some of those, as already mentioned, some of those examples really enable for augmentation using RAG models, for instance, that would allow for public interest use cases, such as, for instance, using Gen AI for disaster response as well. And here, indeed, we have seen many use cases over the last 2 years or so where AI has become a force for democratizing access to data or democratizing the use of open data by the general public. And one use case is, of course, where we have seen that AI can be used to provide a conversational interface with data. You don't require a data science degree anymore to query data. You can actually do it through a chatbot or through another AI-enabled interface. Other use case where AI can be used is to, of course, provide synthetic data. But synthetic data can also be used in order to fill in gaps where typically data might be hard to get, where it might be sensitive, or it can fill in gaps where there is a lack of representation to a large extent. We also have seen that AI can start improve or at least detect challenges with regard to data quality. There's this whole movement around data contracts that can be automated using AI in order to make sure that the data, if the data that is ingested complies with a certain kind of data quality criteria. Question then is, of course, very briefly, how do we write the fourth wave? Well, the first one is to really make data AI ready. What are the requirements for data to be able to be used for AI? And that's also why we have been working on kind of updating the FAIR framework. We now have also suggested we should add ready for AI. The second element, and that's somewhat related to the first one, is that we also need to improve provenance of data. We really need to understand where does the data originate and also what was the context in which the data was collected, because that will be very important for subsequently AI training and for also making sure that the data does not hallucinate. We also have to start prioritizing public use cases for generative AI use and for the use of AI for open data. And this, of course, requires us to invest not only in AI literacy, but also in questions that you see. And I've spoken at length about the need to become more sophisticated in actually defining what are the priority use cases for which AI and open data can help. We also have to start thinking about innovation in institutions. And so, as already mentioned, a lot of the concern in today's data ecosystem is concern related to extraction. And that's why we see the emergence of data commons, which are kind of a new institutional way to provide access to data, quite often a way that seeks to align access to data with preferences and expectations of communities as well. So let me conclude by saying is that we are in this weird moment when it comes to open data. On the one hand, we see a massive backlash, and so we could say this is actually the worst of times when it comes to open data. The data has become more closed than ever before. But on the other hand, we also can be optimistic, and we see kind of the best of times emerging where AI can really become a force that enables us to democratize data in ways that we've never had before. So with that, I hope this fourth wave of data, of open data, sets the stage for the panel and might also be used as a way to really understand what is needed in order to ride the wave and especially to prevent a data winter from happening. Thanks so much for having me and best of luck with the panel.
All right. Well, thank you, Stefan. Hopefully, you're going to watch this later. Not exactly at this moment because I think it's about 4 a.m. for him over there in North America. But I think that was a really great way to kick us off here. And before we really make that technological shift and talk about AI from that perspective, I'd like to start with the institutions. So, turning over to you, Francois, tell us about the role of national statistical offices when it comes to data and AI. They've long been custodians and the trusted data stewards. But what does the NSO really bring to this debate?
Thank you, Mercedes. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. NSO, National Statistical Offices, actually bring a lot to this debate, and actually much more than many of us would think. In this fantastic summit, if you check the program National Statistical Offices, you do a keyword search, it happens only for that session. So congratulations, you made it to the most important session, absolutely. But I'll try to explain to you why NSOs are so central and why, again, we need them to make the open data work. If AI is transforming the way data is used, this will be NSO who will ensure that this transformation strengthen public trust in data. Long before open data became popular, long before Gen AI, NSOs were already putting quality data out. Their core mission is simple, but very powerful: producing data, good data, reliable data about people's lives, the economy, the environment. Today, and we heard it from Stefan, we live in a world of data overload. There is more data everywhere than any time before. AI can generate text, can generate summaries, can generate data sets, including fake data. But I would say in this data flood, this is the NSO who actually play a unique role. They produce data that are validated, that are quality controlled, that are transparent and comparable across time and countries. And that's the first thing which NSO bring to the AI debate. They bring the quality fuel which AI systems need to function, and that's a very significant contribution. Second, NSO brings structure and standards. The AI, I think we know it works best when data are machine readable, well documented, and structured. NSOs produce standards on how to do this. They produce classifications, they maintain consistent time series, they provide metadata, which explains the context for numbers. In short, they structure the reality of the world, which AI can then digest. So that's the second contribution: quality data plus standards and structure. Third, the NSO, and that's very important in the world we have, they operate under very strong legal and ethical framework. They protect confidentiality. They follow principles of neutrality. They serve the public interest, not commercial incentives. So in the AI era, all this matters more than ever. Again, official statistics are optimized for societal value and not necessarily for commercial value. So that's what the NSO brings, and that's quite a lot when you think about it. Now, how is AI changing the game for NSOs? In Paris 21, we are quite optimistic. You could hear Stefan, balancing the plus and the minus. I'd like to focus on the positive. We see two areas of opportunities for AI for NSOs. The first one really is on data production. If you look at it, check the SDG data, all the development data, there are still a lot of data gaps. And AI gives us a chance to produce more granular, more useful, more timely data. And there's work which we are doing actually together with Google and NSO in Mongolia to produce better, quicker population and housing data using AI and satellite imagery. So the world is thriving with innovation based on AI. The second area of opportunity is really access, and I think India is a good example of what serious people can do good with AI. We all agree, and Stefan was mentioning this, data is still very complex to find, to understand, to use. And if a clever chatbot can put good data at the fingertips of users, should it be the media, should it be the population or policymakers, that's a blessing. Of course, you need serious people to make it work, and I think NSO are serious people who want to make it work. So in Paris 21, I would say that we see AI as an accelerator of the data evolution. We are hopeful and we have reasonable hope that AI can be a force for good for open data. In the end, AI, I think, will not replace NSOs. AI will reward those NSOs which are modern, open, structured, and trusted. So AI will make NSOs thrive. Yet, if we want AI to strengthen open data and the public debate associated with public data, then it's important to invest in NSOs and in the foundational dimensions of statistical capacity.
Thank you very much. That was really, really helpful. I like the way that you framed it with the three things, especially that the NSO brings to this conversation, as well as the importance for investment. So now I'd like to hear from the NSO here. Rohit, if you could tell us, in this AI-driven ecosystem, especially when it comes to an evolution of the role of NSOs, as Francois mentioned, should the NSO act primarily as a data producer or as a steward and a regulator of data and statistics?
Thank you, Masjid. Thank you, Pansu. I thought half the work had been done by yes, thank you very much once again. So let me just discuss it in two different manners. So one is, in present role, NSOs cannot have a binary or exclusive role that I'll be only data producing and somebody else will take up the onus of being a data steward. It has to be a combination or intersection. Now NSO's role has to evolve, and it needs to evolve from being only a passive data producer to something which is orchestrating the entire data ecosystem. So that is how I look at NSOs. To begin with, let me talk about the production capacity, which Francois, my colleague, talked in detail, but I just want to emphasize on few points. One is that what NSOs produce, that cannot be produced in any other ecosystem. So NSOs has continued to produce data which it produces, the GDPs, the CPIs, the inflation, the socioeconomic indicators, the surveys. It's just impossible for any other organization to produce so much of data. So data needs to be produced by NSOs, and we need to continue to produce those data. Most importantly is that we have been say, NSO India. Let's talk about NSO India. NSO India has a history of almost 75 years, and now we are in our 76th years. Over a period of 76 years, different types of classification, codes, templates have been created, best practices have been absorbed over a period of time. So NSOs, with just because of its legacy, has the capacity to produce quality data which I feel no other organization has. And most importantly, let me tell you one more thing here, that NSO is supposed to produce data for analysis. If you really think about any other source of data, the primary use is not analysis. Administratively, it's for administration. Geospatial is for something else, not for analysis. So NSO is the only organization which produces data for policy making, for analysis. As a result, the NSO's data is comparatively, I'll say, nothing is perfect, comparatively has better quality, better standards, better production philosophies in comparison to any other data. But having said that, I don't mean that other data are less important, and other data is equally important, but we need to work with those data to bring it to the standards on which the NSO data is produced. A. Now, second point, and Maziz, you are free to tell me when my time is over. Okay. So, the second point is that, but what is the evolving role of NSO? So, we have to understand that their NSO has an evolving role, and that evolving role, I saw it in four pillars. One is data governance, which we all talk about, talking and how to govern any data. Then second is, which is to me is very important, is validating a data set. So administrative data has been created, but whether that data is up to the mark for analysis, for use by AI, that is something I would say is very important, and NSO plays that role to validate that data set. Then orchestrating the entire data ecosystem. And as I mean, what do I mean by that? The example is that on 24th of this month, we are going to call every state government to talk about how to best use their administrative data. So orchestrating the ecosystem to work to better the data for AI. And lastly, which is also very important, is ethical requirements, trust, and all that. So this is what, and we at NSO India have been working on it. We have our own national metadata standards. We have our quality frameworks. We have our own codes and classifications. We have a digital bouquet of data dissemination, because if data cannot be accessed, there's no point talking about data even. So the very logic of NSO existing is data dissemination. That is why we are working on it, and all of you must be knowing, most of you may be knowing that NSO India has come out with the MCP server as well. So you don't have to come out with your own, and it has your own environment. If you have a cloud subscription, work there in the cloud and get it connected to our database and do whatever you like to with that. So this is a few things I wanted to tell you. So we cannot be any more binary. It has to be a mix of both. That's what my point is.
Thank you, Rohit. I think that's a very logical answer, and thanks for laying that out. So now we've spoken about the roles, the mandates, but let's get practical. Randy, from a technical perspective, if a ministry wants to publish an open data set tomorrow, what are 3 things that really need to be in place for this data to be AI ready and for responsible reuse at scale?
Thank you for that question, and I know in a couple of previous comments, these topics may have come up. I'm going to emphasize on those again here. The 3 key principles that we at Google and Data Commons are putting in place is using and enriching metadata. I know Rohit also mentioned metadata is so important. And once the data is enriched with right amount of metadata, that data will be easily understood by agents in today's world. And then comes your standards. We can't just operate in different 20, 30 different ways of organizing the data. We have to have certain set of standards like schema.org, SDMX, NMDS, but they have to be interoperable. We have to build adapters so that these standards can talk to each other. Otherwise, we will still be in like my standard is best standard or not. So that is a very important aspect. And last but not least, from the third thing I would say is the provenance. When I say provenance, I'll explain in a very natural language. Is when you take any food product and you read there is nutrition label, it tells you a lot of information about where that food was produced, what is the content, what kind of nutrition information. Something like that, data needs it too. Data needs provenance, which tells where it originated from, what kind of usage this data could be used. Is it public? Is it open? Is it restricted? And in addition, there could be additional enrichment on provenances. As data travels, there has to be some sort of a history of that travel and if there are any enrichment or changes have been made. So that way, we not only know where data is coming, how it has traveled, but how you can use it as well. So these are the 3 key points I would say that would make your data AI ready in a reasonable way. The agents can talk to this data.
Thank you. That's, yes, claps all around. That was really great to hear, especially for the work that we're doing. I think that answers a lot of my questions in terms of my day job. So this is very helpful for guiding me as well. In terms of, so now we've discussed the institutional roles, the technical conditions, but taking a bit of a step back, over to you, Chris. What's actually new in AI in this moment, and what's new to this debate today?
Sure. So, as opposed to my esteemed panelists, I am not a technical statistician or AI guru. I come from the world of philanthropy, and specifically, I am most focused on working with grantees primarily in Africa that are helping unlock the data revolution for better policymaking across the continent, and connected with that, also ensuring a strong, robust data governance around that. And what's been interesting is in the 4 years of overseeing this portfolio, we've gone from talking about data revolution and data governance to AI revolution and AI governance. But the issues remain largely the same, and that shouldn't be surprising because at the end of the day, data is just the lifeblood that's making AI work, right? And so I sometimes wonder, like 30 years ago, would we have thought about Excel? We put data into Excel, we got an interesting insight. Now we put data into an LLM, we get exciting insights. So what's changed is we've gone from the narrow to the general. We're going from something that was very expert and niche to something that, in theory, anybody could use. We've gone from something where we would use a little bit of data to now we can use all of the data, in theory, right? So it's this speed and scale which I think is making it different. But coming back to sort of thinking about, at least in the context that I focus on in Africa, my main concern is that a lot hasn't changed, because unless we're worrying about some of these more fundamental issues, I do worry that AI is in some sense a storm in a teacup, at least in parts of Africa and other parts of the global south, and further enhancing this wedge between the north and the south. So we still need to worry about connectivity. We need to worry about electricity. We need to worry about infrastructure, capacity. We need to worry about multi-stakeholder approaches for participation and governance. We need to worry about sovereignty, and we need to worry about accountability mechanisms. All of these big fundamentals, that's just one whole piece. And then the other side, of course, is having that data in the first place. You need local data. We need local languages in that data. We need the trust and safety behind that data as well. And all of those fundamentals are still very, very weak in many of the countries that I'm working in. And so that's the question that I keep coming back to is, are we moving the needle on these fundamentals for this to truly be meaningful?
I think that's a very, very important question and highlights some of the things that I think the rest of the conference this week are really going to talk about in terms of the connectivity importance, the capacity importance, and of course also the importance of local data. But one of the other elements I think that always comes to mind, especially for official statistics, is trust. So Rohit, I'd like to hear from you again, especially as AI systems actually generate their own insights. How can governments ensure that official statistics remain the real trusted reference point for decision making in policy?
I tried asking this question to AI, and what I got was, really didn't make me happy. So it talked about legal, it talked about audit trail, it talked about provenance, and it didn't make me any happier, because we need to talk about AI readiness of data first in terms of how people understand it. We keep talking about in technical languages, jargons, we remain in these bubbles. And we all understand what bubble is, where few are inside it and rest of all of us are outside it. So that is why the problem I see. So I am perfectly in agreement with my panelists here when they say, what is AI readiness of data? It is, in two lines, it is data and metadata problem. So if I want to make my AI data, my data trustworthy, how should I do it? So I cannot stop any person going to Gemini or a ChatGPT or anyone seeking an answer about data. Now, being an NSO, I need to ensure that question is directed to my database. My database is the preferred way to look at, to search for that answer. That is the trust. That's how I'm going to generate trust. And as part of it, we have done many of the activities. We have ensured that metadata is available. We have MCP servers. So anyway, if you plug that tool in, it straight away goes to my database. So I'll say, Masdiz, that it is important that we see this trust thing not from the legality spectacles, but from the point of view of AI readiness. And if data is AI ready, believe me, it's going to be used by any AI system. So interoperability is one. And lastly, public engagement and literacy is also very important. if we can't do these two things, I think it would be difficult. People should know whether it is right to ask a question to a AI or go to the NSO's web portal to seek that answer. So these are the 2 points I wanted to say.
Definitely, I think the data literacy is absolutely an important part. And back to that question about AI readiness as well, I think that brings up what Randeep was saying earlier. I know, so Randeep, maybe just back over to you. If there's a concrete example that comes to mind where AI actually improved the quality or usability of public data.
I mean, I don't have to go too far. Data Commons is that example where we have implemented and brought in data from various different organizations, NSOs, aggregators, government agencies, and we've connected the dot between what is the, and I'll use an example like when there's a diabetes, what's the correlation of diabetes to food scarcity or surplus of that? And having that ability to ask that question in natural language has been a key aspect that Data Commons has also enabled. As Rohitji was saying, right? People should be able to talk to this data in the language that data understands. So in terms of with the Data Commons implementation, bringing the data into a single standard format or interoperable format, enriching with that metadata, and then serving it through natural language is what Data Commons is an example. And just also reverse playing that, we implement these principles internally at Google as well for our enterprise data, where our business operations can use natural language to make sure our internal data is also following these same principles. So we're not really we're not just talking the talk, but we're walking the talk as well.
Thank you. That was the exact wording I was going to use. You're walking the walk, not just talking the talk. So that's great. Thanks for the example. Francois, at the global level, how are things changing in statistical systems, and how is the global statistical community adapting to this conversation?
Thank you, Mercedes. Again, I think the statistical community, what we can observe, has understood that AI is going to stay. It's not going to go. And you can see the community really tackling the issue seriously, from understanding together what it means for them to be AI ready, defining, as Chris was saying, what comes in the cloud of NSOs, what is outside of the cloud of NSOs, electricity, connectivity, at times, data governance in the country as well, and what they can influence to make it work. So the community is very serious about it. We have started to update our systems. There were a few examples here from India using MCPs for dissemination. We have started to update our people as well. There's a lot of training going on at times where the financial situation of that community is not super rosy. You have some lead NSOs in the world which budget are cut by 1/3. So this comes at a time where the statistical industry really needs to modernize and adjust. One thing which was said by my panelists was the need to invest in citizens. You have a few countries where NSOs are actually taking a lead role in this, both the normal layman on the streets, trying to make them aware of the beauties of quality data. What Randeep was saying, understanding the difference between something which is trustworthy, which is coming from documenting sources, and something which is fake. When you check the actual ability of people globally to do this, it's not going on the right direction neither. You check the numbers from the OECD in terms of mathematical ability of students or people, the trend is downward. So that's a bit worrying. Yet, you have a few countries where by specifically addressing statistical literacy, you can make a difference. So I think the community is in a good position, is aware of what needs to happen. There are lots of exchange of experience in the UN, in the OECD, in Paris 21. A lot of, I would say, aggressive piloting and a lot of wise deployment, because the NSO, the statisticians, are wise people. They'll not go for the hype and the heat of the moment, but they are serious about improving quality of the data they release.
I like that. Aggressive piloting and wise deployment. I think that's maybe another keyword we can keep using. So looking ahead, Chris, given everything that's been discussed here today, and I really appreciate you saying that you're not a statistician, but I think you bring immense value to the statistical conversation that we have here. But would you say that we're entering a renaissance for open data, or are we more at a time where AI can actually undermine the value of public official statistics? What do you think?
Similar to my colleague here, when I got this question, I was like, God, I don't know. I'm going to ask ChatGPT. so no, jokes aside, it's a tricky one, of course, because there is no right answer. But I do think it's interesting to sort of think through what are the pros and what are the cons, and then sort of map that to a couple of examples that I've seen in real life. So the first is, what makes us think that this could be a positive renaissance? Well, if a country has really strong, well-structured, high-quality data, then AI is obviously going to increase the value of that because it'll help reduce hallucinations, it'll help reduce bias. You have this really powerful tool, but you require that fundamental there first. Similarly, if you have a robust ecosystem of researchers, of startups, of civic innovators, similarly, once again, now you've created this wonderful tool where you could overlay AI on top of open data and help foster that community even further. And finally, you've democratized to some degree accessibility. So now all of a sudden you don't need a PhD to have to sort through all of these data and statistics, and that's great. But to all of those positives, there is of course a con, and it goes back to what your fundamentals are. So if you have synthetic data flooding the ecosystem, that can rapidly erode trust if that's not being properly managed. Similarly, I was thinking through platform substitution. So how many of us back in grad school suffered through navigating through WDI or Comtrade? You knew your data backward and forward. I didn't have the luxury of asking some platform to do that for me. And so do we risk sort of creating this death spiral of knowledge in a sense? And then finally, if we have these magical systems, does that create a sort of perverse incentives in countries with limited budgets wherein we actually decrease funding for surveys, for censuses, other things like that because, well, we can just have AI do it, right? And so there's no right answers here, but these tensions are something that every country, every NSO is going to have to be grappling with. And so I was reflecting a little bit on my own sort of experience of this on the continent. And those of you who are familiar with Africa, 10 years ago, there was literally a law in Tanzania that if you published a statistic that was not blessed by the NSO, you could go to jail. There was an experience in Uganda about 6 or 7 years ago where the World Bank classified Uganda as an LIC, when the president had gone on record by saying they were an LMIC. And this created a massive sense of trust issues. So now that if you basically do anything in Uganda with data, there has to be someone from the NSO on that team that's working on that. So I think to myself, with AI now turbocharging this, does that now create incentive for even a further crackdown on things, or does that sort of go in the other direction? One thing that gives me a little bit of hope is seeing this explosion recently of citizen-generated data. So people who are actually now trying to bring rigor and voice to the data that they themselves are experiencing or could collect every day to help augment what's going on. So I do see this little bit of a bridge there. But again, no perfect answer, but just some of the tensions that I wanted to highlight.
I like the way you framed it with the tensions there, and also the mention of citizen-generated data, which, as Rohit, you mentioned, the data sources, all of them are important. Of course, official statistics are what we're talking about mainly here, but the tensions that we're looking at need to be addressed, and citizen-generated data can often be an interesting add-on. So we do have about 10 minutes left. There is a big clock that I'm very aware of, so I want to keep to time. I do want to see if maybe anybody here has a question, and while people think about putting up their hands, I will ask one provocative question to the whole panel. But when it comes to the risk that we're all talking about and these tensions that you mentioned, Chris, is there a risk that AI companies benefit more from open public data than the citizens who actually funded its production? So have a quick think on that, and then if anyone here does have a question, I saw a hand go up right there, so I'm going to call on you. You are the lucky question asker. Please, if you could tell us, my friend, if you could tell us who you are, where you're coming from.
My name is Prem Ganguly. I'm a final year student at Thapar University. My question is for Rohit, sir. So NSO deals with lots of data, right? So the biggest issue that AI has in data collection is data biasness, which completely changes the model's efficiency and how does AI impact the decision. So what are the standards that NSO follows for data biasness and reliability of the data?
Just before we answer that, I'll take maybe one or two other questions. I saw a quick hand over here as well.
So hi, I am Sharad and I am representing data science in your non-profit called DataKind today. And my question is to the panel is that given that AI-ready data needs to have both data and metadata, so what are the most priority components that the metadata should have? Like there is provenance, there is possibly the source, but what else?
All right, I don't know which one is working here.
Okay, hello. So my question is, Mr. Christopher, I'm Akansh. I'm an aspiring researcher, and I often face the issue that was mentioned by the previous questionnaire too, that there's a lack of granularity within the metadata that is given to the same repository. And when it comes to open data, that becomes an even more important challenge, considering that there's no fixed pipeline because of multimodal nature of the same data. And so my question was, how much granular is enough so that we could cross-verify, we could implement our own checksums, if you will, for the data that we have, for instance, for sensors, for IoT devices.
Thank you. And we'll take one last question here.
Thank you. I'm Dolly Hussain. Sorry. So this question is basically on open innovation. Now, there is a lot of open innovators who have been working on different aspects of innovation, and they require a lot of data. How is, what is the kind of status on using of this data to really do open innovation on for, like, say, for example, a sandbox on fintech or a sandbox on tourism or sandbox where there is data is distributed, but if you really want to do any new innovation using AI, you require a lot of data set. Now, what is the policy on that? That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is that how do we govern when we are in a distributed environment? How do we govern that data, especially if one central body is really holding that data, then it becomes easy. But if there are multiple people who are holding that data, how do we really govern that data? Thank you.
All right, so that's been some really interesting questions. And then I know I have a little provocative question there as well in terms of who benefits most. We've got 6 minutes left. So I'm going to turn it over to the panel, answer any of those questions. And if you want to offer a quick closing remark, it's up to you. Randeep, I see you grabbed the mic, so I'm going to go with you first.
I'll take a point on your I can't say provocative question. So, in my opinion, public data is available today in its silos. Large, I would say, corporations like Google should put in effort to like bringing that public data into open world. So through open source projects like Data Commons, through this project, we are making this data openly available through open APIs, providing technologies like MCP server and agents which will enable this open public data to be interoperable, having connectivity between the data as well, so that normal people can talk to this data in the natural language and get that information they want. So while I do see that this is only possible when multiple of these large organizations will come in and start making this public data using all these standards and principles we talked about, making it openly available through open source platforms, open APIs and MCP servers and stuff like that.
I'll try and link the two questions actually on granularity and governance because I think they are actually linked. I think this is where it comes down to, I think, two things. One, what does the community want and need, and what are the mechanisms in place in a country to advocate for that need? And I think that varies from place to place quite dramatically. But I think one thing that I've been very focused on in particular countries is working with institutions that are really helping define national and in some cases even sub-national data strategies that are articulating some of these questions. I sit in Menlo Park, California. I have no idea what they are, but I certainly have some amazing grantees who do know what they are. And so I think that is a really big question: is how do you really localize the questions you're asking so that what you are thinking from a policy standpoint or a governance standpoint is fit for purpose. One last thing, though, is I love your provocative question, and I can't resist because that's my favorite space. Is I'm of two minds here. If you have a robust, thriving ecosystem of innovators and researchers and other actors who can leverage the data, then yes, they can punch just as much as with any private company. But at least in the context of the African continent, too much what I'm concerned about is for AI to get better and better, it needs more data. And Africa is the last frontier, arguably, of more data. And so you're seeing all sorts of strange and, in my opinion, somewhat unethical things going on, right? So if you look at Kenya in the past 2 months, in the massive bilateral health agreement that's been signed with the U.S., that health agreement is tied up because required within that is the turning over of tons of Kenyan health data, right? There's a reason why that was included in that agreement. If you think back to about 2 years ago, you have Tools for Humanity's WorldCoin, which was essentially 2 steps removed from OpenAI's crypto, that was essentially scanning Kenyan farmers' irises to build its proof of personhood LLMs, right? And with very, very sort of shady governance behind that. So when we're seeing those practices in environments that are very power asymmetric, we have to be quite concerned. But again, there's no like yes or no answer. It's going to be very context dependent. So.
Okay. So quick points on data access. So as you all be aware, Government of India has something called AI Kosh. I request all of you to visit that. A lot of data is available there. May not be a perfect data, but a lot of data is available. Then we have open data. Then we have our own eSankiki portal, national data portal. Then there is a microdata portal. So I'll request all of you to just search. All of these are available, and you don't need to have any AI tool for that. It's all available through APIs. You are innovator, you are developer, access the data through API and use it. So that's part one. To your question, I think in shorter term, yes, I think there is a real threat that those who, the data is created with the public money, but perhaps the benefit might just flow more to somewhere else. But it's very easy to handle that. We should have it defined. Look, open data is not free data. At times we feel open data is free data, open source is free source. It's not that way. Open data should be open data. It should not hamper open data movement at all, but we should have a very contextual agreement of data contribution. We should have a data dissemination policy. We should put a cost to our data, and probably then going forward we'll have easier way forward. That's how I look at it.
Thank you for the very good questions. I'll go with the ones on metadata and how much enough metadata one can put in the system. The good news is the statistical community is speaking with the tech on what is good metadata, so that the tech solutions eventually can find the good data which is produced by the Rohits of this world. Last week we were with NSOs in Africa to actually help them put the metadata in the form which can be digested by the AI machine. And this will go a long way. So the answer is not 5 tags, it's not 200 tags, it's as much metadata tags as the machine can help you to put along your metadata, your data, so it's read by the machine. And they are very working level solutions for this. I will skip your difficult question because of time, obviously, not because it's
obviously because of time. Well, thank you for all of that. Just on a quick ending note there, I think Rohit, what you hit on about, open data is not free. It's just free in terms of money. It's out there, but it was built on something, and the costs that go into it might not look like the tangible coins and bills or credit cards, but it is built on something. And in the work that we do with countries, that's one thing that we do talk about quite a lot and that we emphasize is there are data out there, but how free are they really? And so I think it's an important thing for us all to consider when we do think about AI accessing, using, and making use of these data is really where is the value going and who is benefiting from that and who is funding that information. So I hope we can leave on that note, and a big round of applause for our speakers here. A big round of applause for you all for coming out. I see in big red letters, time is gone. So I will release all of you. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great rest of the conference.
Bravo. Really good.
Thank you. Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Really good. Somebody must have thought out it.
Thank you so much for
Thank you very much. That was fast.
I can sing and say that about it. This is wonderful.